What if I told you that during the same era, pineapples were valued more than thoroughbred horses, and millions of people had never tasted fresh meat in their lives? The Victorian era was a time of striking contrast, where incredible wealth and technological progress coexisted with unimaginable poverty. Nowhere was this gap more evident than at the dinner table, which was a veritable theater of social status. Watch the video to the end to find out what white bread for the poor was really made of, and what dish, which cost a fortune, would only cause us bewilderment today. I will reveal to you a secret that changed the entire culture of dining in high society. It was not only about the food itself, but also about the revolutionary way it was served. The Victorian era witnessed a transition from the old French style, known as service à la française, to the new Russian style. This transition completely changed the dynamics and meaning of a dinner party. Previously, with service à la française, all dishes, soups, roasts, desserts, were placed on the table at the same time. This created an impressive picture of abundance, a veritable still life of food. Guests chose what they wanted to eat themselves, and dishes often cooled down before it was their turn. It was spectacular, but chaotic and impractical. The new service à la Russe, which came to England in the middle of the century, was a real revolution. Dishes were served sequentially, one after another, course by course. This transformed dinner from a static picture into a dynamic performance. Each dish was served hot, which was a huge step forward. Such a dinner could include 12 or more courses, lasting 3 to 4 hours. It all started with oysters or light appetizers, followed by 2 soups, a light one and a thick one. Then fish was served, prepared in a complex way. After that, it was time for the entree, a light meat dish. The culmination was the releve, the main roast, such as a huge roast beef or a whole turkey. It was solemnly brought into the hall and carved in front of the guests. After that, a pause was served in the form of an icy sorbet to cleanse the taste buds. This was necessary before the next act of the performance. This was followed by game dishes, such as pheasant or partridge. Only then did the vegetables come, served as a separate course. Then the table was filled with complex sweet dishes, puddings, cakes, and intricate jellies. Everything ended with dessert in its original meaning: fresh fruit, nuts, and cheese. This culture of long dinners seems excessive today. How do you view food, as fuel or as a ritual? Share your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about what made up 80% of the diet of an ordinary working-class family? The answer is simple, but it says a lot about the era. It was bread. For millions of Victorians, bread was not a supplement to dinner, but dinner itself. It accounted for the lion's share of the meager family budget. It was not the fluffy white bread we know today. Most often, it was dense, heavy black or gray bread. Its quality varied greatly, and it was often stale. White bread was considered a luxury, available only to the middle class and the wealthy. The second pillar of the poor's diet was potatoes. They were cheap, filling, and provided the body with the necessary calories. Potatoes were boiled, baked, or fried, and were often the only hot meal of the day. Their availability saved many from complete exhaustion. The third most important element was fish, but not the kind you might think of. In coastal towns, it was cheap herring, which was smoked and turned into kippers. Its strong smell and salty taste made stale bread more edible. Eel was also popular in London, sold as jelly or in pies. Meat was an absolute luxury that a working-class family could afford at best once a week. Usually it was the cheapest trimmings, bones for broth, or a little bacon. Most often, bread was spread with dripping, melted fat left over from cooking roasts in wealthy homes. Tea was a universal drink, but it too cannot be compared to modern tea. The poor bought the cheapest, low-grade tea leaves or even used tea leaves. It was brewed many times until the drink was only a pale color. However, it provided warmth and the illusion of satiety. Sugar was an important addition to tea. It was relatively cheap and a quick source of calories. Sweet tea helped workers endure long hours of hard physical labor in factories and docks. It was affordable fuel for the body. This meager diet seems almost impossible. What was it like to live on bread and potatoes alone? But what if I told you that even that bread wasn't always what it seemed? In the next chapter, we'll reveal the shocking truth behind the pretty picture. What I am about to tell you is now prohibited by the strictest laws, but in the Victorian era, it was a frightening norm. I am talking about the mass and systematic falsification of food products. It was the dark side of the Industrial Revolution, when food became a commodity produced far away from the consumer. The main motive was profit. Manufacturers and traders resorted to any tricks to make their goods cheaper and increase their weight. The victims of this deception were primarily the poor, who bought the cheapest products. White bread was a status symbol, and everyone wanted to buy it. To make bread from low-grade flour whiter and more attractive, unscrupulous bakers added alum to the dough. This chemical compound of aluminum bleached the crumb, but was harmful to health. But alum was not the worst thing. To increase the weight of the loaf, ground gypsum, chalk, and even sawdust were mixed into the flour. The buyer paid for bread, a significant part of which was simply inedible. It was outright fraud that hit an already meager budget. Milk was another area for fraud. It was ruthlessly diluted with water, sometimes by half. To restore the drink's cloudy, milky appearance, chalk or starch was added to it. This fake product had almost no nutritional value. Tea, which was so loved by the poor, was counterfeited with particular cynicism. There was a whole business of buying up used tea leaves from wealthy homes and restaurants. These used leaves were dried, colored with graphite or soot to give them color, and sold again as new tea. Candy and lollipops bought for children were especially dangerous. Bright, attractive colors were achieved through the use of toxic dyes. Green was produced by copper acetate, red by red lead, and yellow by lead chromate. It was not until the second half of the century, in 1875, that the Food and Drug Act was passed, introducing criminal liability for adulteration for the first time. This was the first major victory in the fight for consumer rights. If you found this shocking but little-known piece of history important, please like this video. Guess how much time and money it took to grow a single fruit on a Victorian table? We are talking about pineapple, which in those days was not just food, but an absolute symbol of wealth and high status. Its cost was comparable to that of a small estate. The reason for such high prices was simple. Pineapples did not grow in the cold and damp climate of England. Special greenhouses called pine houses were needed to grow them. These were complex and incredibly expensive structures made of glass and brick. A tropical climate was constantly maintained inside these greenhouses. Heating systems running on expensive coal and complex ventilation systems required round-the-clock attention. It took several years to grow a single pineapple from a seedling to a ripe fruit. Due to this complexity and cost, pineapples were rarely bought to be eaten. More often than not, they were rented. Enterprising gardeners rented the same fruit to different families for dinner parties. The pineapple became the centerpiece of the table, demonstrating the status of the host to all the guests. When the fruit finally became too ripe to be displayed, it was ceremoniously eaten. It was quite an event. The opportunity to treat a guest to a slice of pineapple was the highest expression of hospitality and wealth. Another equally important symbol of luxury was ice. In the era before the invention of electric refrigerators, the ability to serve chilled drinks or ice cream was a sign of great wealth. Ice was as expensive a commodity as exotic fruits. Ice was not only harvested in winter from local ponds. There was an entire industry dedicated to importing ice. Huge blocks of ice were cut from lakes in Norway or New England in America. They were loaded onto ships, carefully insulated with sawdust. These luxury items seem commonplace to us today. What do you think would be the Victorian pineapple of today? In the next chapter, we will learn what people who did not even have a home height. For the vast majority of Victorian Londoners who did not have their own kitchens or even permanent housing, street food was not a luxury, but a necessity. The city streets were filled with vendors offering quick, cheap, and hot food. It was a huge and noisy open-air restaurant. One of the most popular street foods was baked potatoes. Vendors walked the streets with special portable ovens. Hot, fluffy potatoes with a little oil or salt were a filling and warming lunch for a frozen worker or clerk. As mentioned earlier, oysters were the food of the poor. London markets were overflowing with them. They were sold straight from barrels, several at a time for a penny. It was the most affordable source of protein, and oyster stalls could be found on every corner. Meat pies were another street food hit. They could be eaten on the go, were hot and seemed filling. However, the quality of these pies was highly questionable. No one could say for sure what kind of meat was used for the filling. Urban legends and satirical magazines of the time were full of grim jokes about cats, dogs, and rats being used in these pies. While this was probably an exaggeration, the use of poor quality or spoiled meat was common practice. Buying such a pie was always a gamble. For those who preferred fish, there was a large selection of fried or stewed eel. Eel was cheap and abundant in the Thames. It was cooked in special shops and served with sauce. It was a fatty and filling dish that provided a lot of energy. Soups were also very popular. For 1 penny, you could buy a bowl of hot pea soup. There was also the famous sheep's head soup, which despite its name, was quite watery but hot. Soup vendors carried their wares in large cans. Simpler snacks were also sold. For example, boiled peas with vinegar and pepper. Children loved to buy penny slick, a small piece of ice cream served between 2 glass plates. The buyer had to quickly lick the ice cream off, after which the vendor would wipe the glass and use it for the next customer. What if I told you that the Victorian kitchen in a wealthy home was as complex and high-tech a mechanism as a steam engine? The gap between rich and poor was evident not only in the food, but also in the technology used to prepare it. An aristocrat's kitchen was a veritable food factory. At the heart of this factory was a huge cast-iron stove. It was a massive unit that was heated with coal and took up an entire wall. It was the pinnacle of engineering at the time. Operating it was an art form that required experience and skill. Such a stove had several ovens with different temperatures and many burners for pots and pans. It also often included a built-in boiler that supplied the entire house with hot water. It was the central core of the entire household. At the same time, the kitchen in a poor man's house was the complete opposite. Most often, it was just an open hearth or a small stove. All cooking was done in a single pot suspended over the fire. Baking or complex sauces were out of the question. Rich houses had entire systems for storing food. There were separate cold rooms, pantries with stone or marble shelves that kept things cool. Meat, milk, and butter were stored there. As we already know, an icebox was an essential attribute. It was a wooden cabinet insulated with cork or sawdust with a separate compartment for a large block of ice. It functioned like a modern refrigerator, allowing perishable foods to be kept fresh. The set of kitchen utensils in a wealthy home was impressive. There were dozens of specialized tools, presses for ducks, special knives for fish, shaped molds for jellies and puddings, handheld ice cream makers, and spits with a clock mechanism for even roasting of meat. The poor, on the other hand, made do with the bare minimum: one pot, one frying pan, and a few wooden spoons. The difference in technology was enormous. It determined not only what people ate, but also how it was prepared. This technological gap determined everything. What do you think? What kitchen technology today divides people just as much? In the next chapter, we will talk about those behind these technologies. The invisible army of servants. All those hours-long banquets, elaborate dishes, and sparkling cleanliness would have been impossible without an entire army of servants. The kitchen of a Victorian mansion was not just a place, but a complex social system with a strict hierarchy. These people were the invisible hands that created luxury. At the top of this pyramid stood the chef. In the wealthiest homes, this was a man, often brought in from France. He was paid a huge salary, was a real star, and was often a tyrant. He alone decided what would be on the menu, and his word was law. A whole team was subordinate to him. There were sous chefs, pastry chefs responsible for baking and desserts. There were assistants responsible for specific areas: fish, meat, vegetables. Everyone knew their place and their duties. At the bottom of this hierarchy was the scullery maid, or girl on errands. This was the hardest and dirtiest job in the whole house. She was responsible for washing mountains of dishes, cleaning copper pots and pans, and doing the dirtiest jobs, such as gutting poultry. Her working day began long before dawn, around 5 in the morning. She had to light the fire in the stove and fetch coal and water. Her work ended late at night, when the last plate from the banquet had been washed and put away. The living conditions of the servants were harsh. They lived in tiny rooms in the basement or attic, often several people in one room. These rooms were poorly heated and had almost no daylight. The contrast with the luxurious rooms of the owners was striking. Servants ate separately from their employers, and their diet was strictly regulated. They usually ate leftovers from the master's table, but in more strict households, they were given separate, simpler meals. Luxurious delicacies rarely found their way onto their plates. Without this complex system, based on strict discipline and cheap labor, the Victorian lifestyle would have been impossible. The luxury of some was built on the exhausting labor of others. It was a foundation hidden from the eyes of guests. For those Victorians who could not find work and feed themselves, there was a place they feared more than prison. It was the workhouse. Ending up there meant losing one's freedom and dignity and falling to the very bottom of society. The workhouse system was created by the Poor Law of 1834. Its basic principle was simple. Living conditions inside had to be worse than those of the lowest paid worker outside. This was called the principle of less desirability and was designed to deter those who supposedly did not want to work. Food was the main tool for maintaining this principle. The diet in workhouses was deliberately meager, monotonous, and tasteless. It was scientifically calculated to provide a person with the minimum calories necessary for survival and hard labor. The staple of the diet was oatmeal porridge, or gruel. It was a thin, watery soup made from a small amount of oatmeal and water. It was served for breakfast and dinner, day after day. This monotonous food became a symbol of the poverty of the era. Lunch usually consisted of bread and cheese. The bread was dry and stale, and the cheese was of the lowest quality. Sometimes, once or twice a week, watery soup with tiny pieces of meat or bones appeared on the menu. Meals were served in communal dining rooms, where strict silence reigned. Families were separated upon entering the workhouse. Men, women, and children were housed in different wings. They could only see each other during meals, but they were forbidden to talk. The diet was strictly regulated. Each resident was given a precise portion, and it was useless to ask for more. The system was designed to break people's will and force them to leave the institution as soon as possible. Some dishes on the Victorian table were valued not so much for their taste as for their incredible cost and complexity of preparation. They were pure status symbols. One of the most striking examples was green sea turtle soup. Green turtles were imported live from the West Indies, which was incredibly expensive and difficult. The very fact that the host could afford to bring this exotic creature across the ocean was a sign of his wealth. Turtles were often kept in special pools on the estate until the day of the banquet. Making the soup was a long and laborious process. Turtle meat had a unique texture, and soup made from it was considered the pinnacle of culinary art. Serving guests real turtle soup was a demonstration of the highest chic. Since few could afford such a luxury, chefs invented fake turtle soup. This dish became incredibly popular among the middle class, who wanted to emulate the aristocracy. It was just as much a symbol, but a symbol of the pursuit of luxury. This fake soup was made from calf's head. The boiled cartilage and calf skin gave the broth a richness and texture that vaguely resembled real turtle meat. This dish became so famous that it was included in many cookbooks of the era. Another important marker of status was desserts, especially jellies, blancmange, and complex creams. In the era before the invention of powdered gelatin and refrigerators, creating a dessert that would hold its shape was a real art. It required time, expensive ingredients, and ice. Chefs used fish glue as a gelling agent. It was obtained from the swim bladders of sturgeonfish. It was an expensive and scarce product. Working with it required great skill to ensure that the dessert did not have an unpleasant fishy taste. Chefs created true architectural masterpieces from jelly. They used complex copper molds in the shape of castles, animals, or fruits. Jelly was often made in layers, with each layer colored differently, which required hours of painstaking work. The stark contrast in nutrition between the rich and the poor was bound to have long-term consequences. The Victorian era, with its focus on science, became a time of the first serious research into the link between diet and health. Reformers and doctors began to realize the scale of the problem. The statistics collected during army recruitment were shocking. Young men from industrial cities and poor neighborhoods were on average shorter, weighed less, and were in much poorer health than their peers from rural areas or wealthy families. It became clear that a meager, monotonous diet of bread and potatoes could not ensure normal development. This realization prompted the first social reforms. Campaigns began to provide school lunches for poor children. The problem of food adulteration also reached the national level. Publications by Arthur Hassel and other activists led to public outrage. People realized that they were being systematically deceived by being sold poor quality and sometimes dangerous food. The Food and Drug Act of 1875 was a turning point. It laid the foundations for modern food safety legislation. For the first time, government inspectors and laboratories were established to monitor quality. Many of the gastronomic habits established during that era have endured. The English love of sweet tea, puddings, and meat pies is all a legacy of the Victorian era. Cookbooks written at that time, such as Mrs. Beeton's book, became bestsellers and shaped the tastes of entire generations. The opposite transformation also took place. Foods that were once eaten by the poor eventually became delicacies. A classic example is oysters. Due to overfishing and river pollution, their population declined sharply, and today they are considered a luxury item. The Victorian banquet, with its 12 courses and hours-long meals, is a thing of the past. The pace of life has changed, and even the wealthiest people prefer simpler and quicker meals. However, the very idea of food as a status symbol has not disappeared. The era left us with an important legacy, the understanding that access to quality and varied food is a fundamental right. The struggle begun by Victorian reformers continues today around the world. The history of food in the Victorian era is not just a collection of recipes. It is a social history that shows how society was divided into two worlds, and the boundary between these worlds ran right across the dinner plate. We conclude our immersion into the world of striking contrasts of the Victorian era. From tables laden with turtle soup and pineapples to stale bread crusts in workhouses, food was the most honest mirror of the time. It was the language used to talk about status, power, despair, and survival. Victorians turned dining into theater and at the same time gave birth to the science of nutrition. They took luxury to absurd extremes and faced the frightening consequences of food adulteration and starvation. This divide between two nations, rich and poor, was carved out with a knife and fork. What do you think about these striking contrasts of the Victorian era? What other topics from everyday life would you like to see on our channel? Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.